Hi, ladies, let's get started. So, first we have the covenant with Abraham, and this is in Genesis chapter 12, verses 1 through 5. So, the first patriarch is Abram, and he is married to Sarai, which we are able to see on our family tree. So, in this story, in Genesis chapter 12, God starts out by calling Abram to leave his home city in the city of Ur and to follow him. So Abram and God enter into a covenant. And as we've talked about in Unit 1, a covenant is a solemn and binding agreement between people or between God and people. So God and Abram enter into a covenant. And in doing so, God changes Abram's name to Abraham and Sarai to Sarah. So that's how we have Abraham and Sarah instead of Abram and Sarai. So in this covenant, God promises to give Abraham land and children. So this is really key, this land and children aspect. And so being without children, this was a really great blessing to Abraham and Sarah. So Abraham and Sarah were getting old and still did not have any children, and which was not a very good, that was frowned upon. And so God promises that Abraham would have land and children as numerous as the stars. And so this is the very beginning of the people of Israel. Like Abraham founded the Jewish religion without him really knowing it, but he was the very beginning of the Jewish religion. So later on in Genesis 22, this covenant between Abraham and God is tested when God commands Abraham to sacrifice the son that he gave him, whose name is Isaac. So God asked Abraham to sacrifice the son that he promised him, Isaac, which was a major test to the covenant. So this event, this testing and this almost sacrifice of Isaac is called the Akedah. The Akedah. So Abraham's willingness to give up his son is sufficient for God, and an angel intercedes before the sacrifice can take place. So Abraham doesn't actually go through with his sacrifice of Isaac, as we talked about. And instead, Abraham's simply his willingness to give up his son is sufficient for God. And so an angel finally intercedes before Isaac is sacrificed, and Isaac is saved. So the Akedah, so this event, this almost sacrifice of Isaac, does two really important things. The first of which is it forbids child sacrifice within the Hebrew religion. So you will not see there won't be child sacrifice in the Jewish religion. But it also, even more importantly, it prefigures God's own willingness to offer up his son for our redemption. So Isaac is willing to give up his life for the covenant, to uphold this covenant of between Abraham and God, and Abraham is willing to give up his only son. And so this really prefigures God's own willingness to offer up his son, Jesus. So this is a very important event in salvation history, as it prefigures Christ's own actual sacrifice. So Isaac doesn't get sacrificed. He grows up and starts a family. So Isaac is the son of Abraham and Sarah, as we've been talking about. And so after the death of Abraham, he takes over leadership of the Israelite people. And so he marries Rebekah and has twin sons, Esau and Jacob. So Isaac marries Rebekah and has twin sons, Esau and Jacob. So Jacob is an interesting fellow. So even though Jacob is the younger twin, he's through trickery secures his inheritance over his twin brother Esau. So which we talked a little bit about with the whole, bowl of soup, and he trades his inheritance. Esau trades his inheritance for a bowl of soup, and then he tricks his own father Isaac into giving giving Jacob his blessing instead of Esau. So Esau now has the blessing and the inheritance, even though Jacob now has the blessing and the inheritance, even though it was supposed to be Esau's. So later on in his life, Jacob has a dream of a ladder going up to heaven. And in this dream, God renews the covenant of Abraham with Jacob. So Jacob is Abraham's grandson, and in this dream of the ladder and going up to heaven, God renews the covenant of Abraham with Jacob. All right, so a little later down the line in Jacob's life. So years later, Jacob wrestles a stranger who is probably hypothesized to be an angel in the desert. So a very mysterious encounter with an angel in the desert at night. And this angel gives Jacob a new name, Israel, which means one who contends with God. So in this wrestling with the angel, it was it's this stranger in the desert at night is hypothesized to either be like an angel or God, or an angel who represents God. But either way, Israel means one who contends with God. And so Jacob's name is changed to Israel. And this is how we end up with the name Israel, which is even a name present even to today. And Jacob's new name becomes the name for all of his descendants. So we have the Israelites, who are descendants of Jacob. So Jacob married Rachel and Leah, which we talked about in class. A very interesting they had a very interesting family life, Rachel and Leah and their maids. So between Rachel, Leah, and their two maids, Jacob has 12 sons, from whom come the 12 tribes of Israel. So the 12 tribes of Israel are the descendants of the 12 sons of Jacob. So 12 tribes of Israel are descendants of the 12 sons of Jacob, which we got here. All right, and at this time, I'm going to switch to showing you guys one of the annotated family trees. So here we have the family tree that we have been looking at in class, and this is my annotation. This is available on PowerSchool on the Unit 3 materials. So we got Abraham, Sarah's maid Hagar, Hagar's son Ishmael, Sarah had Isaac, Isaac married Rebekah, Isaac and Rebekah had Esau and Jacob, and then between Leah, Zilpah, Rachel, and Bilhah, they have 12 boys, and those become the 12 tribes of Israel. So the descendants of Jacob's 12 sons are the 12 tribes of Israel. And then this part here, Joseph's descendants, you guys don't need to know about this. All right, we're going to go back here. All right, so 12 tribes of Israel. And here are the 12 sons of Jacob. But please you do not need to memorize these. Do not worry about this. So we have Reuben, Simeon, Levi, Judah, Dan, Naphtali, Gad, Asher, Issachar, Zebulun, Joseph, and Benjamin. Again, you do not need to memorize these. All right, so interestingly, among these 12 sons is Joseph, who is the favorite son. And Joseph is the favorite son because he's the first son of Jacob's favorite wife, Rachel. So as maybe you remember, as we talked about in class, Jacob wanted to marry Rachel, but then he was tricked into marrying Rachel's older sister, Leah. And so finally, after 14 years of working for Rachel's father, he finally gets to marry Rachel. And so Joseph is the first son of Jacob's favorite wife, Rachel. So he's going to be the favorite. So because he was both the youngest, so he was the 11th of 12. So he was towards the end of the bunch, and he's also the child of Jacob and Rachel. He is highly favored or spoiled by Jacob. So, and this is how we end up with the, Joseph in the Technicolor dream coat. So he's highly favored, aka spoiled by his father Jacob. So here we have the Technicolor dream coat. All right. So being spoiled by his father is expressed in the fine coat of many colors that Joseph receives from his father. And so he, as is not too surprising, being the favorite son is a problem whenever he has 11 other brothers. So his brothers are very jealous of him. So one of his older brothers, Judah, suggests that the brothers sell Joseph into slavery in Egypt for 20 pieces of silver. So Joseph's brothers sell him into slavery in Egypt for 20 pieces of silver. So Joseph was faithful to his Egyptian master, but he was falsely accused of rape by his master's wife and was imprisoned. So Joseph has a major turn of events where he ends up going in prison because he is falsely accused of rape, even though he was a very faithful Egyptian slave. Excuse me. So, however, because of Joseph's ability to interpret dreams, he's eventually freed by Pharaoh and becomes a leader of Egypt. So in prison, he interprets a few people's dreams and is able to interpret even one of Pharaoh's dreams. So his Joseph's Egyptian name is Zephanath-Paneah. Again, you don't need to know that, but fun fact, Zephanath-Paneah. So part of this whole interpreting dreams, since he was able to interpret other people's dreams, he was able to prepare all of Egypt for a famine because he was able to predict a famine. And thereby, he was able to save his own family. So Joseph eventually forgives his brothers and saves them from a huge famine that strikes Egypt and his brother's hometown. So Joseph eventually forgives his brothers and saves them from a famine. And this is how the Israelites first entered into Egypt. So the book of Genesis ends with the Israelites entering into Egypt because of this famine, but in very happy, on very happy terms, reunited with their long lost brother. So this is the story of Joseph, the many shenanigans that surround Joseph. So exciting news with that last slide. Your notes for this semester are done. Congratulations, ladies. So for your own practice, I would highly recommend going and filling out the timeline that's on page 11 of your notes. I would just make that little timeline and make it as a good visual for your own reference. And then there will also be a worksheet, both hard copy and on PowerSchool. So both of those should help you be able to process all of this information. Please re-listen to this video as much as you need and ask me questions if you have any. And again, this is just to basically make the notes, make the storyboard and the family tree into more formalized notes for your own help. Again, let me know if you have any questions.